Hello humans, I am the Black Cat and welcome to Weird Wednesday. On a sunny day in July of 1954, a man arrives at Tokyo International Airport in Japan. He approaches customs and hands over his passport to be stamped. But there's a problem. The passport itself looks real enough. It has several stamps on it from other countries, including Japan. However, the immigration officer doesn't recognize the issuing country. The officer asks the man where he's from, and the man responds that he is from Taured. This only confuses matters even further, as the immigration officer has never heard of such a place. The officer and other officials at the airport ushered the man into an interrogation room to work out who he was and where he was from. The man insisted that he was from Taured and that he travelled to Japan on business several times before. The officers asked the man why he was in Japan, and he said he was there for business with a company. The company he named did exist, so they called them, only for the company to say they'd never heard of this man and that there was no international meeting scheduled. The man then told officials the name of the company he works for, but they failed to find any reference to this company either. The man was becoming increasingly frustrated. He insisted his story was true. They asked him to point out where Taured was on a map. He indicated it was located between France and Spain, and that his native language was French. He was fluent in Japanese and French, as well as being able to speak a few other languages. As he looked at the map, however, he noticed that the location that he pointed out as being Taured was shown on the map as Andorra. The man's frustration grew as he told officials he had travelled to Japan many times before and has never come across this problem. Unable to come to any satisfactory conclusion, the officials decided to put the man up in a hotel under close guard until they could work out what was going on. Was he a spy? Was he a criminal? They couldn't be sure. Two immigration officials were stationed outside the door. The room only had one window that didn't have a ledge, and the room was quite high above the street. That night he was served dinner, and the man soon retired to bed. The next morning, when officials returned to the room to further attempt to solve the mystery, the man was nowhere to be found. Him and all his belongings were gone. The room was guarded all night by the two officials, and they didn't see the man leaving the room. It was not possible for him to go out the window on account that there was nowhere for the man to safely go. He simply vanished in the night, and the man was never heard from again. So who was he? Where was he from? And where did he go? These are questions that have baffled people for years. So, what are the theories? This story first appeared in a book called The Directory of Possibilities by Colin Wilson that was published in 1981. The book is a collection of stories and theories about the paranormal and unexplained. Some have suggested that because a story appears in a book that was released some 30 years after the supposed events, that is an indication that the story isn't true. I'm not sure if that's enough of a smoking gun for me. I mean, there are plenty of unexplained stories that aren't published and possibly not written down until years later. Some stories may never be written or published, which would be a shame. Another theory is that the man experienced a time slip, that he was possibly from the future and somehow time slipped into 1954. I'm not sure that theory holds. For one, he would have noticed the different clothing. He was also apparently carrying European money that would no doubt have changed. So a time slip doesn't seem to fit this story. However, what if he dimension jumped? Both paranormal enthusiasts and theoretical physicists suggest the possibility of different dimensions, and even multiple dimensions. The idea that there are universes or dimensions that are parallel to this one. They are similar, but would have differences depending on what had changed in history. Think Planet of the Apes. Yes, I know that was technically in the future, but what if humans didn't change through evolution and apes, as they are now, evolved instead? The theory is that that possibility is played out in a parallel dimension. Also, consider that countries can change names depending on the ruling government or ruling faction of the time. Some countries have indeed changed names in the past. In fact, Andorra's name is somewhat of a mystery in itself. According to Wikipedia, the origin of the word Andorra is unknown. So with this in mind, it's possible the man somehow slipped into our world from a parallel dimension, where Andorra was actually Taured. That would explain why the company he was there to meet with did exist but didn't know him. The history of that company could be the same in both dimensions, but the history of the company that he worked for didn't. That would also explain why he was fluent in Japanese and had a passport showing that he had travelled to Japan several times before, because he did. And after a few hours he slipped out of our dimension again. Did he return to his own dimension and return to his normal life? Or could he have slipped into a third dimension and just continually have travelled? Just imagine, if he did return to his own dimension and tried to tell the story of what happened to him, his story would be the same as the story here, in this dimension, unexplained. Who would believe him? Perhaps people would accuse him of making it up. It's an interesting thought. I'd be interested to know other people's thoughts on this story. Do you think it's fiction? Do you think he could have slipped through dimensions? I'd like to know what you think. So let me know your thoughts. But for now, that's all the time I have for this mystery. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!